Introducing NASM 1, NASM's ultimate membership program, where the NASM community helps each other build incredible careers, transforming the lives of the clients we inspire and supporting each other as we grow and succeed. NASM 1 is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy.
Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm personal trainer, wellness coach, and positive psychology practitioner Darlene Marshall, and spooky season is here. The pumpkins, they are a-spicing. The corn up the hill is a-rustling in the wind. And all around my neighborhood are those gigantic skeletons that they make at Home Depot. And I could not think of a better time to invite one of my absolute favorite people, one of my absolute favorite practitioners to the show. I have a very clear memory of the first time that I spoke to today's guest. We were in grad school together, University of Pennsylvania Positive Psychology program. And she asked me a bit about myself and, like you do when you're first meeting somebody in a professional setting. And then I asked her a bit about herself, and she was kind of like, yada, yada, professional, yada, yada. I'm a total weirdo because I'm obsessed with death. And then she showed me a variety of her skull accessories, and we had a deep dive conversation about the Memento Mori motif that's all over Rome that I'm kind of obsessed with, which I'm sure she's going to explain in our conversation today. So that's a slice of what it's like to have a conversation with Jodi Wellman. The most delightful conversation that you will ever have about an incredibly morbid topic that most of us try to avoid. And that's why I invited her to come on the show. Jodi is a speaker. She's an author, an executive coach. She's a facilitator. And she describes it as she facilitates lives worth living, which I think is really an interesting phrase on the angle when we talk about the well-being thing, which I know we talk about a lot on this show. She's the founder of 4,000 Mondays, and she's also now an assistant instructor at the University of Pennsylvania in the Applied Positive Psychology program, which I think is also super cool. An expert on how contemplating our own deaths can spark life. And I'm going to let her explain what all that means, because I think it's one of those things that when you say it to somebody, they lean in and they go, huh? Or maybe some people run away screaming. I don't know. Jodi will have to tell us. So without further ado, Jodi Wellman, welcome back to Better Than Fine, because I know before we were on the NASM network, you had done a couple of episodes with us. And so I'm excited for the newer listeners to know you.
Oh, thank you for the warm welcome. I feel embraced, and also thanks for the memory about me calling myself a total weirdo. That's very accurate. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of why we get along, right? We're both absolute total weirdos, but weirdos for well-being. And I think that's the best kind of weirdos to be.
Well said.
So tell us about Memento Mori and 4,000 Mondays. These are two phrases that I think when you know what they mean, there's a lot of but when people hear you're a weirdo for death, I am curious. Do some people run away, or do some people like, oh, and shrink away?
Right. Well, fortunately, no one has had the guts yet to fully run away when I talk about it. But I do get some raised eyebrows until I think I win them over. And so here's the scoop. This phrase called Memento Mori, it's an old Latin phrase, and it dates back centuries. And it translates to remember we must die. Okay. And that's the part where people will think, okay, that sounds awfully morbid. How fast can I exit the scene? And yet wait, because the remembering we must die is totally on purpose, and that's intentional. And it's not just so that we can sit around and be morbid and, be total downers. I mean, that seems a little anti-positive psychology, but it's all in service of living like we mean it. And you had asked about 4,000 Mondays, and yeah, I called my company that. And because that is approximately the human lifespan. So women roughly get 83, men roughly get 78. That's the kind of the average-ish. In the middle is the 4,000 Mondays. And so that is the number that I like us to wake up to so that we can be aware and then, use the remaining time we have to our advantage.
How many Mondays do you have left? Because you track it, don't you?
1,881.
1,881 Mondays.
And counting.
Yeah.
Do you know how many you have left?
I don't know. I know that the last time we spoke, I went and tabulated it, but I don't track it. I have to go look it back up. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I who knows? Either way, I try to keep that presence of thought because I know that you know this. No one on the internet knows this, but I have a Memento Mori tattoo, and you were one of the few people that has seen it because it's in a secret spot. And so I know for me, one of the things we bonded over was I have a similar, very positive reaction to this. Like, remember, it's a short-term project, and you get to decide what you get out of it, right?
Yeah. I love the phrase short-term project, and I think that's where we delude ourselves, right? Is like we have this we have to do this because we need to somehow mitigate anxiety and get through our busy days. But this notion of not we're conscious that we're going to die. No one here has received a spoiler alert today. News flash. But
you're not it.
That'd be awfully weird.
Yeah.
Kid Santa's not true, and we're gonna die. But that we know it's gonna happen, but we absolutely gloss over it, and we intentionally keep sort of deferring the idea. Other people might be dying around us as we age, but that's sort of I'm gonna still be okay. And we defer our existence. We defer the plans, the life that we want to live for later, for a later that may not come. And that's the part that grips me. Like, that's why I started doing all this, is that I can see how we collectively squander our lives. And it's not just other people out there. I'm not judging y'all. I'm judging myself too. This is what we do as humans, is we do take our time for granted. And so this is our chance. When we get really granular, and I get granular with the Mondays, it's on purpose to say, wake up, because this time is ticking down. And so therefore, how do you want to make the most of that time we have remaining?
Yeah, and I think we see this, right? You were once a personal trainer, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, long ago and far away.
175 years ago, yes.
175 Mondays ago.
Years.
And I think we see this a lot in wellness and fitness and the health space, right? Where people think, oh, that's not going to be me, right? I'm not going to be sick. I'm not going to age poorly. I'm not going to be incapable in some way.
Totally.
And they wake up to it at a point that they couldn't intervene as aggressively as they could have if they woke it up a few hundred Mondays ago. Yeah.
Oh, completely. You're tapping into something that in existential psychology, it's called this idea of personal specialness. And don't get me wrong, each and every one of you, you're totally precious and special in your own unique ways. And also you're totally going to die. You're perishable. And so we have this thing where we do that sense of convenient, bad things happen to other people. So for example, when someone else, other people get their car broken into, but if my car's broken into, shock and horror, or if you start to age and you get arthritis, this is ridiculous. But everyone around you is getting arthritis, so it's this notion somehow that we are impervious, that we will somehow not be exposed to the perils of humanity that everyone else around us is. And you ain't so special, honey. You are completely going to experience some sort of demise. So now things are getting morbid. Things took a turn, Darlene.
Done. Well, leave it to me to give it the turn, lady.
Wait a second. Now let's just do a summary. You're not special, and you're dying slowly as we speak. You're a rotting corpse. Anyways, but back to the point.
And you're neglecting yourself, and by the time you realize it, it'll be too late. Welcome to Better Than Fine.
Better Than Dead podcast.
Done.
It's again, all back to the point of we're surprised, and yet I want us to not be surprised. I want us to stop and go, yeah, the truth's the truth. It can suck, and yet let's use this to our advantage again. That's the whole point, is how do we hack life? I know back in your wellness world, there ain't no shortcuts necessarily to getting fit and healthy. But there are some tips and tricks we can use along the way to enjoy the ride while we're on it. And that is, for example, about let's stop putting our heads in the sand and forgetting and conveniently denying and not wanting to have the conversation that our time is coming. Because it is, let's not linger there. Like, I don't want to have like a pity party about it. I just want to remember it and go, right. And now that means I need to take action on all the things that are on my bucket list, because I may not even get 1,881 Mondays. Who's kidding who?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're tapping into one of my favorite coaching questions to ask, which is, if a client is really stuck on a certain constraint,
Mhm.
right? Like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, and this is why, and blah, blah, blah. I'll play the game with them. Like, okay, I'm not going to tell you that's not real. That's your lived reality. We just did an episode a couple of weeks ago about gaslighting, right? Like gaslighting as a coach and gaslighting yourself. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, validate it then. If that constraint is true, then what? What does that mean? And what are you going to do about it? And it's like, okay, instead of, now I feel like we're taking that question really macro
Yeah.
instead of, I'm just not going to think about the temporal nature of human existence. It's like, no. Okay. If that's true, if I really only get, let's say my number was like 1,500, if I only get 1,500 more Mondays,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And what meaning am I going to make out of it? And what am I going to do with it? Right. Is that like the essence of how existential psychology leverages us into well-being?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. And you're just making me think about something that if for some strange reason, the idea of the official countdown is a tad too much of a turnoff, okay, that's cool. Let's just work with where you can be comfortable enough to just get up and go. Right. Because
Yeah.
that's all I want is like my goal is, I always say I want to defang death, mostly just because I like the way it sounds, but I really like the idea of it, of demystifying it. I'm less interested in that. And I'm more interested in what it's going to take to get us to live. And the truth is that we need deadlines in order to take action. Right. And so for so many of us, and I think both of us, Darlene, as positive psychology practitioners, I'll be honest, I resent the fact that as human beings, we are wired in such a way that we are often more motivated to avoid pain than seek pleasure. You see
Yeah.
this all the time at all the gyms, all the studios, right? It's because,
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the reasons why sometimes we are motivated to get into an exercise program. It's because we want to avoid the things we don't like about ourselves, or because our doctor did say that our heart rates are not where they should be, or blood pressure or whatever. Okay, fine. But fine. So then I just say, all right, I can resent that. And then I can say, but let's move on and do the thing and recognize the deadline. The deadline, like, I don't know about you, but I need deadlines in order to get projects done. I wouldn't have written my book unless I had a deadline. I wouldn't have done anything unless I have a deadline. Oh, by the way, we all have a deadline and it's called 4,000 Mondays. And
Yeah, that's why
so
they call it a deadline.
it is
Dun, dun,
exactly it.
dun.
Drop dead. What do you want to do
Your
before
drop
you do,
deadline.
in fact, drop dead?
Oh, there's so many things I want to do before I drop dead, Jodi. One of them is to remind our listeners, you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and my guest today has a TEDx talk with 1.3 million views, was the 14th most viewed TEDx talk in 2022. Her name is Jodi Wellman, and we're here to talk about death. Jodi, how did you get into death?
How did I wade into the murky waters?
Ooh. I love you.
Well, I've always been fascinated by it. And I not like totally bizarrely, growing up in a
No,
morgue or anything.
you weren't a weirdo growing up. You grew into your weirdness.
Well, I've just always had different versions of weirdness, let's be clear. But
Yeah.
I've always found, okay, so here's the thing. Early career, like my first career out of college was as a personal trainer, right? Always been interested in helping us live better. Like how can we make the most out of this time? And then same thing after working corporately for 17 years, I got into executive and leadership coaching. Again, how do you like your work and your life better than fine? And this juxtaposition is so not lost on me that we're all striving to just like and most times love, but sometimes just like life a little more and just enjoy the ride. And also we're going to reach the deadline that I talked about. Like that combination is fascinating to me because we're all just swimming in so hard to love this life that will end. And that just the absurdity of it all it will never not astound me. And so I wanted to explore the weirdness of the finality of it all just as much as the tips and ways that we can like life more while we're here. And my mom died in her late 50s. And by the way, I'm almost at the point, this occurred to me the other day, that my day will come soon when it will be, I'll be at the age where my mom will have died 10 years later. So there's just a fun thought experiment of, oh my gosh, imagine if I was like my mom and I only had 10 years left. How would I want to
Yeah.
spend that time? That'll be a fun exercise over a glass of wine.
We should have a party. I think
I
we should
would.
also have a party I have a friend who recently had a party when he passed the birthday of his father's age when his father had died. And
Oh,
he's perfectly healthy, has none of the health indicators that he will follow in that path.
yeah.
And so when he transcended that age, he had a big party. So
Oh,
maybe we'll throw you a big
oh,
party someday.
I love that. Well, you're reminding me, my mom had her first heart attack when she was at the age of 42. So when I turned 42, I made it like the year of the heart,
Oh.
which originally was going to involve a lot of cardio. Yeah, that didn't really pan out, but it did involve a lot of heart-shaped candy and cookies. But anyways, yeah.
That's side note, Jodi is an incredible baker.
Oh, thank you.
The
Thank you.
best brownies.
Well, you got to enjoy this life, our 4,000 Mondays in
Enjoy this
moderation,
life.
right? But back to your question about why I got into this with my mom dying. Let's be clear. A parent dying is always sad and crappy. Not always, but probably usually. And for me, though, it was my perception that she died with so many regrets about all these paths not taken that woke me up more than anything. It wasn't that life is short. It wasn't that I should really take better care of my cholesterol, although that's true too. It was really about, wow, I am sitting on all these dreams that I have for myself, and I'm just too chicken to take action on it. And so I saw in her, on her death, with all the manuscripts she didn't send out and all these business plans that she had all these ideas for, and the dreams that just died with her. Oh God, did that ever grip me? Because that would have been maybe my path. And so it really jarred me and made me realize, again, the scarcity of time, point one. But point two is, I do not have time to be afraid of taking action on things. I need to remind myself of this consistently. This isn't just like a one and done cure, just like practicing a Memento Mori intervention, looking at a skull or counting your Mondays. It doesn't mean we're ever, fully back on track for life, to not take it for granted, but it's a consistent reminder that I do find helpful.
Yeah, I think there's two rich things in there for me, right? And first, just thank you for sharing with us about your mom. I think you speak to this idea that it's with you, right, the rest of your life. The idea that it's a practice, right? It's like, okay, I'm not just going to journal about death once and then I'm going to magically be alive in my heart and soul forever. And also this idea that you talk about in your TED Talk, which is, and I know that it came from somewhere else, I just don't remember where, I'm sure you know, that it's very often at the ends of our lives that it's not the things we did that we regret, it's the things we didn't do.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who it was. Who was it?
Well, that's Mark Twain.
There we go.
Yeah.
I kept thinking Tom Sawyer, and I'm like, no, that's the character. Who's the writer?
You get half points.
Yeah, halvesies points is good enough for me. I'll run with it. It's better than no points. But I think that's such an important point of, we so often are so anxious and worried about taking the steps into creating whatever we want to create in the world, or being our fully expressed selves in the world, because we are afraid of how people might react or what might happen, or we're going to fail, or whatever stories we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
But I so appreciate when you make that point in your talk, because it is those things that you look back on and say, well, what if I had blank? Or what if I had done it sooner? What if I had done it earlier? What if I whatever?
Yeah.
Are there things now that you look back at that you're like, ooh, I'm so glad I grabbed the bull by the horns, flip it the other way? The things that you're like, oh, I jumped off that cliff right at the right moment. I'm so glad I didn't wait.
Oh my gosh. I love what you're saying. The research is so clear that the regrets of commission and omission elicit very different feelings for us. So regret of commission, something dumb we did. We can rationalize that over time, but it is the stuff that haunts us, back to being spooky, haunted. The idea of, I feel the need to have a ghost fly across the screen somehow. Those are the things where, I always fast forward everything to the deathbed. What are the things at the end you might think, man, I just wish I had done that thing. I always said I wanted to go there. or write that book, or I wanted to do that thing. And it is exactly the path we didn't take that will often eat us alive. And back to, I guess, old writers and poets, if I could bastardize Elizabeth Barrett Browning, for many of us, I do believe it's true that it's better to have lived and lost than never to have lived at all.
Nice.
Right? Like of the things that you just said, like hypothetically, oh, it's good that you look back and think, okay, I did it. Even if we messed it up, right? Even if it didn't work, like even if you take okay, so I'll give you an example. I joined a friend in Palm Springs here for an introduction to learn how to play bridge class. Don't laugh. I was just like, I was like, this is going to be hilarious, right? Like I knew I was scared of it. And the truth is, it was terrible. Like, it was so horrifyingly bad. Like I was so shamed, but fabulously, hilariously shamed of like, oh God, but I am so glad that I registered and went and tried,
Sure.
right? Like, I just feel like I participated. Like I deserve the participation ribbon, Darlene, that you were earning, right? Like I want this. But so we doesn't even have to win, but we feel good about ourselves afterwards for just giving it a go rather than not going at all. So that's the equation I think we have to evaluate sometimes.
Yeah, I'm reminded of like my own example that I want to share of times that I didn't win, and at the time I beat myself up. Not very many people realize, even fans of the show and stuff, that I had my first blog when I was 15. I had a blog almost continuously from 1999 until like I became a trainer like 12 years ago. So a pretty big chunk of time. And I had a YouTube channel before I started this show. I've had, other feeds that I would try to get off the ground. And at the time I felt like such a failure because I couldn't seem to market them in a way that gave them traction because I just didn't understand some things that I know now. And so you see the show and you're like, oh man, she had this podcast that has like been running for years. And it's like, wow, she just like did it. And it's like, well, no, I had 15 years of failers before BTF managed to click, partly from the encouragement of people like you, Jodi Wellman. But there were so many times that I told myself a negative story, but I'm so grateful now that I had those reps when nobody was looking.
Yes.
Because it meant that when it mattered, I knew what to do to pull it off.
All background work, right? All training, like to bring it back to fitness, like that was the warm up. That was the pre-training. Like you had to, like you said, go through those reps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Overnight sensation.
Yeah. The magic. Later. Yeah. Overnight sensation 15 years later. I like that line. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and our guest is an ICF professional certified coach and a certified professional co-active coach. I don't know what that means, but maybe Jodi could tell us. It's Jodi Wellman. And you also talk about in your work this concept of like not aliveness. And I think that it's a really interesting like line that you draw when you spell out your work that, okay, you're like, your organs are functioning, you are moving through the world, but I feel like so often people talk about like, you're alive, but you're not living or what the heck ever. And I really like the way that you rephrase it, but can you speak to your construct of not aliveness and how we flip that for ourselves if we realize like, oh no, I'm really not living a life here.
Exactly. Right. Well, you just reminded me, I am a fan of diagnosing the dead zones. Like I do find it helpful to be able to pinpoint, oh, these are the parts of your life where you're feeling flatlined. Maybe it's your social life or your love life, or maybe it's your health, right? You're feeling like you don't have the energy to do the stuff you want to do or not with the confidence, blah, blah, blah. So after sort of diagnosing, because most of us have that, like, it's not a mystery to us necessarily that our lives are feeling dead or in autopilot or bored in some way. I think that the not aliveness is that we go through the motions quite well. Man, we know how to adapt and we know how to function in ways like, I call it like highly functioning zombies, where we can go through the motions. And my greatest risk, and I want to instill fear in every single person about habits and routines. And I realize this is going to rankle possibly the entire fitness community, because I recognize habits, like healthy habits. Okay, they're good, right? Like I'm not trying to wreck someone from Monday, Wednesday, Friday. My exercise keeps the wheels on the bus, and that's what keeps my life in order. I'll give you that one, maybe because it's healthy, like just like dental hygiene, don't mess with those habits. But where life starts to become dull is where we get into the unthinking habit and routine that leads to boredom because we're mindless, right? So it's just going through the motions. And that's like, blow that up into do we want to live a going through the motions kind of life? Probably the answer is no. So for example, with the workout, if it's just the same thing every time, that's the opportunity to incorporate novelty. And you're like, trust me, no trainer in their right mind would ever have anybody do the same thing at the same time. But from people who are on their own,
I bet there are.
We don't not speak of, but novelty, like shaking things up, is so important for our experience of feeling alive. And so when we find ourselves in these autopilot routines, and we feel maybe even a little bit bored of the same thing, maybe it's the same dinner thing we've got going on, the same date night, the same thing we do every weekend, because it's just like we just unthinkingly do it. That's a version of boredom. And by the way, I've always loved the notion that boredom is the luxury of those who have lost perspective on their impermanence.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Right, because we're not clued into the fact that, dude, your time's ticking. Like, you may not even get all those Mondays that you just calculated. Like, it could be 4 more Mondays, or it could be a heck of a lot more than the average. That's fine too.
But I think we could flip that the other way though, right? Like if it's a privilege, how many people out there have a daily constant reminder of their mortality because of their circumstances? And we don't really have that here. And I mean, like, as we're recording this, I can think of 2 big old examples that we're not going to step on those get canceled bombs. But like, there are some acute places in the world where your mortality is a constant reminder, and you don't need a motif on top of a coin or a crypt or a tattoo or whatever. Right? Like, I think we forget how lucky we are.
We definitely do. And I spent part of the weekend at an event with cancer survivors and had the privilege of listening to them reiterate everything I've ever read and heard about people who have had the brush with death. And they have an appreciation on life that the rest of us mere freaking mortals don't have. And they are so much clearer on what their priorities are, because now they've come close and they're like, all that stupid stuff I used to care about, like how fast I responded to that email, it doesn't matter anymore. Although I'll always be neurotic about responding to emails. But anyways, we lose perspective. And I do think that back to this idea of practicing Memento Mori and remembering, right, like life's short. Like I'm going to need to get on. I'm going to need to maybe snap out of this routine that might be, quite frankly, lulling me into a go with the flow existence that works when we need it to, when we need to unplug from high stress times, of course. But as a rule of thumb, a way of living, it's not usually the liveliest version of our lives that we could be living, so that when we get to the end, are we going to feel that sense of like, I killed it? You know, and it's all relative to you. Like, I don't have a prescription about what killing it means for you. It could be a very kind of peaceful, sort of like light on social interaction life. Or for you, it could be balls to the wall, all the concerts, all the everything, all the volunteering all the time. Like, only you know what your recipe is for a life well lived, that I look at in 2 ways, right? Like living wider with vitality and deeper with meaning. So some of us want to widen our lives even more because we are feeling a little bit bored and we haven't got back on the horse after COVID, like getting back on the routine that we, not routine, ritual. The routine is not good. Ritual is good, about having maybe a fun road trip every summer with the friends or something, or meaning, that sense of maybe connecting to something bigger than you, going back to visit some sort of a spiritual angle, or maybe it is about getting involved in your community in some way. However, you know, you come alive, and you forget, because as adults, we get so busy and so responsible and swept up in the current of responsible work. But when we do stop and we take our pulse in a different way, like our like our vitality pulse, our aliveness pulse, and go, there are so many things I used to do that brought me so much joy or fulfillment or both. And what if I rekindled that again? Like, what if because time's ticking, I keep thinking, oh, I'm going to blow the dust off that guitar that I've got stored. For example, I've heard this from clients, like the old musical instrument or hobby or language you started to learn but stopped learning. We all think, oh, I'll get to it. Oh yeah, it's on my horizon. Your horizon might be closer than you think.
Yeah, I buy that. And I think if we continue down this path of like, okay, the horizon might be closer than you think. There's a time pressure that we can use to spark ourselves alive. I think we're in a moment right now where there's a lot of people that don't have the resources, the resilience, the structure to their life that they might have had even a couple of years ago. Or I think the other thing that's happening right now that makes this episode so timely is a lot of people are waking up to the aftermath of the last few years, right? That like COVID changed their life, it changed their behavior, or it changed them. This acute period of stress. And not just in the United States. Like I think we're seeing this play out in the global stage in a lot of really ugly ways too. And I guess where I'm going with this is I think it's really easy if you've got resources to be like, yeah, I'm going to take that vacation to Bali and like go to Italy and eat, pray, love it. Like, yeah, pump me with pasta and then I'm going to meditate. And it's like, not everybody has that luxury or resource. And I know there's also a lot of people who are suddenly caring for elder parents while struggling to pay bills while also with children, right? Like there's all of this pressure combined with uncertainty. And so I guess what I'm saying is if you don't have the resources to just dump and cut to Thailand, how do you fill your life with life if you feel like your life is nothing but constraints right now?
Yes. I love this question so much that it's painful in a good way, because this is one of my very most favorite things about the art and science of being alive in a way that you want, is that we underestimate the impact of simple pleasures and joys. Because, oh my golly, like, do we not, we're all or nothing thinking. I know, I get it too. Where we are like, in order for me to be living like I mean it, it does mean I've got to be doing whatever you fill in the blanks, right? It's got to be these vacations. It's got to look good for social media. Maybe I've got to be like going out on trying all the restaurants or going really deep and starting a nonprofit. Like, let's pull the reins back for a sec and actually analyze what life is. It's like, life is a collection of increments of time, just all stitched together. And when you get intentional about even a 20-minute increment of your life, even a 5-minute increment, you're that strapped for time because you're looking after dogs and elderly parents and young children. First of all, that sounds hard. Second, though, if you got 5 minutes, that's a 5-minute increment you can design to bring you joy. And my recommendation is, I do this in workshops all the time, write out a list of 30 things that make you happy. And the key is that 25 of them at least have to be accessible things you can do kind of in a given day. And for many people, I think about one woman I know who, she's like, I just love, in between all of my WebEx and Zoom calls, I just go outside and just peek on my garden. I just look at the tomatoes and I just see what's going on. And it just centers me. And I come back in and I am a better version of myself for that next meeting. Or think about how you spend your lunch. I've been using this example lately because it's just such an easy tidbit. And many people, they're like, lunch? What lunch? I'm just scarfing food back at my desk. Okay, I'm not here to tell you back to time crunches or cash crunches. You don't need to go take an hour and have a liquid lunch. That does sound like fun, but you can be mindful and go, do you do the thing most of us do, which is find something edible and also then just like answer a bunch of emails, probably
on a screen.
And or you could choose to spend it just a touch different. What if it meant scarfing back your food? Fine, but just what if you just sat outside And while you were maybe just look at some birds or read a chapter in your novel. And I work with some people where they're like, I don't have time to read a chapter. I'm already stressed. I'm like, great. What if you read a page? What could that do for you? And so all of this, I realize when I say it, it sounds sort of eye-rolly simplistic, but you all know, and I know your listeners know, because we know the impact of physical activity, even the benefit of even just going for a walk around the block or walk to the mailbox and back, how that can change your day, which, dare I say, I'm going to aggrandize this, changing that 5-minute experience of walking to get the mail, movement, fresh air, look at something in nature, get your head out of that stupid project you've been working on. That changes your 5 minutes, which changes your next meeting, which changes your afternoon, which changes your life. So that did not cost anything. That did not cost a ton of time. It's about being deliberate with how do you like to spend little increments of time and do more of those things. That's it. That's it.
I think it reminds me so much our mutual friend Cindy, in her work in micro moments, right? Like, I think when someone is struggling, they're languishing, they don't have the life that they feel like their authentic self would be living. It's very easy to think, well, I just have to blow everything up because nothing works.
Yeah.
And as a person who took that strategy, it's a really intense strategy. I don't recommend it for the faint of heart. But if life is lived at moment to moment in the emergent time of the reality you're in, right? Like you and I right now are living this moment together. And when our listeners listen to this episode, they'll be living that moment. And so often we're not actually living in the micro moment. And so you want to feel different in your life, but you're not willing to conceive that like it could be as small as focusing on the moment you're in.
Yeah.
Trying to make that moment a bit better.
Yeah.
And when you said simple pleasures, I thought, yes, that's why your brownies are so good.
Oh, thank you.
I'm angling. I'm going to see Jodi at the end of the week and I'm angling for her to bring me brownies.
See what we can arrange.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I do think that this speaks to this idea in Buddhism of present moment awareness, right? Like there's so many different places we see the same idea and theme play out. That if you are in the moment you are in and you are being intentional about investing in that moment, that does have a ripple cascade. But when you're languishing or you're just suffering, you think that it can't be that simple. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Give it a try. It's that I think we try to smart ourselves out of it and we will stick to our beliefs because I believe what I believe strongly too. And then it's just, well, what if I tried something different just for this next little increment? So for example, I think it's a combo of not just trying to aim to do the thing you know you like, but also try to eliminate a thing you know you don't. So I don't know about you, but I used to have a habit of scrolling through my newsfeed. And it's addictive. They design it to be, so they're winning. And I would never feel good when I was done. Like I've never got what I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted. I wanted something interesting or juicy or newsy or fun. And I was just scrolling endlessly. And I would end every, let's just say it was a 5-minute session of scrolling, click, board, scroll, click. I'd always feel a little bit dead inside, like imperceptibly, but actually perceptibly, versus I know what makes me feel alive now. And so if I have a 5-minute increment between meetings, I'm going to go on, have you ever been on explore.org?
No.
Oh my gosh.
I'm about to be.
Say goodbye to all your productivity, but it's worth it because it's basically live animal cameras around the world on animals, even in shelters. It's crazy. But all I'm getting at is for some people that would be like, yeah, no, thanks. I'd rather scroll through my newsfeed. Well, then you do that. And I'll look at animals. I'll look at an owl somewhere in its nest and that'll bring me joy for 5 minutes because it's just a conscious choice. So, it's just, these are just deliberate. This all goes back to being deliberate and the boring thing that I'll be the first to admit that it's not snazzy. It's when we identify the stuff that makes us feel alive. And that's our job to do because no one's going to deliver it to us or for us. Sometimes it happens. Like someone's going to bring you a cake on your birthday, maybe. But other than that, you are your own entertainment and vitality director in your life. So you have to design it and say, I know that these things lift me up. These things make me feel dead. Okay, therefore I'll do less of them. And when am I going to schedule them in? This is the part that's unglamorous, is the schedule. Like, how many times have you said to a friend, oh my gosh, we totally have to get together, and you mean it, but then if you didn't put it in the calendar and they didn't put it in the calendar, you're not meeting. You have to book it in the calendar. If you say, like you said earlier, I want to like about going to Italy. Oh, okay. If you want to go to Tuscany, do your little eat, pray, love thing. Like, if you have the resources, okay, good. When are you going to book it? You have to book it. And I actually even subscribe to the notion of planning some of those micro moments. Like, it'll be a conscious thing where the husband and I will often meet up for lunch and we'll synchronize our time. And we have been eating outside, which is nice, but there are some times where we'll intentionally watch a funny clip on YouTube of a comedian we like, because it's an intentional, I just want to laugh, you know? So planning, put it in your calendar, and then let life happen in a way that is going to be way better than if it just happened to you or if you scroll through your news feed.
Yeah. And I think what I hear in there is, and I've known this of you, so this is not just this interview, but you bring a degree of intentionality to how you structure and live the phases of your life, right? Because I've also known you through a phase transition. And that intentionality, I feel like so often is focused on, oh, I got to like live my purpose or build my business or, whatever. And for you, so much of that intentionality is like, what do you not want to regret at the end of your life, or what makes you feel more alive right now? And I think it's just a really interesting application of all of those ideas.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And you did just make me think of something too, because back to your really important question about if we don't have resources, how do we live like we mean it? And I went immediately, my instinct is to go to the, cheap and cheerful. And I will never not advocate for those, because cheap and cheerful is amazing. I also don't want to not be a champion for the big stuff. And it may not be, Darlene, like what you were saying, like pressing the detonation button on your life, because sometimes we need to eject.
I don't recommend it. I'm not telling anyone to do it.
No, I know that. I mean, in rare circumstances, is that useful? But I also don't want to like only keep us small, because this is about living wide and deep. And just keep in mind, like, it can be so scary to change a career or to change a relationship that needs changing, or to make the bold move to like apply for the program or take that extra certification. And okay, so some of those things do require some financial resource and some time. But for most of these things, it's just us jumping over that hurdle of fear that is lovely and awful simultaneously. And that, like, it to make a change, for example, in your work, it may represent a short-term, medium-term hiccup, for example, but maybe not. And my only encouragement there is, like, if there are bigger dead zones in your life, you could infuse your life with lots of, owls on the internet and checking your garden and having really yummy brownies. And that's going to help you. And you still got to do the bigger thing that's going to really rejuvenate your life. And so that may also not even require a ton of resources. That's not taking a yacht or a cruise. That is just about taking responsibility for this one life we have. And that might require a big, scary decision.
Yeah. And I think in my experience, the more of those little things that I've given myself permission to do, the more ready I was for the big things, right? The more that I let myself feel good about those moments, the greater the juxtaposition became to the things that weren't working. And that allowed me to accept what was true about what needed to change. You have a book.
Perfect.
You have a book coming out. Yeah. I
Oh my
pre-ordered
gosh,
mine the
you're
other
totally
day.
Yes, I am beyond excited. Okay, so it's called You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. It's everything we've been talking about here and more. And it's available for pre-order, and it comes out on May 7th. So
I bought mine already.
Did you?
And where can we find? So I know there's the Instagram, but I also want to plug, there's the research on your website. So where can we find you on the Instagram? And then also we're going to tell everyone to go take the survey on your website. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So Instagram is at 4,000 Mondays, and you have to spell out 4,000. I know it's annoying. And then my website, where I do have resources, including a calculator, which will calculate your Mondays for you if math is a
Yeah.
problem in your life. And that is 4000mondays.com, where you'll also see that quiz pop up, which is the How Alive or Dead Are You quiz, which will kind of diagnose maybe what zone you're in and then give you a guide about how to maybe do something about it.
Yeah, I wish I had planned ahead. I'm scrolling really quickly to your website to see if I can find the calculator fast. And I'd be like, I should have checked my Mondays before.
Oh, it's all right.
I
Go to the
did.
go to the resource page, but I could
will.
probably we could
Yeah,
riff.
we're gonna make this happen. Any so thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. Thank you for sharing your beautiful, brilliant work with us. Any last thing that you'd like to encourage our listeners as they contemplate their death?
It is do not be afraid of the Grim Reaper. He is he's a wily son of a bee, but man, he is here to help us make us remember that he's coming, and we might as well get down to the business of living before he does in fact come knocking.
Yeah, Grimmy's your friend. Thank you very much, my friend, Jodi Wellman, for being on the show. And I would love to hear your feedback about this and every episode of Better Than Fine. So if you want to reach out, you can find me. I'm on Instagram. It's darlene.coach. My email is info@darlene.coach. If you're going to find me on Instagram, shoot me a DM. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me with your questions, thoughts, feelings, feedback, ideas. Our Substack is betterthanfine.substack.com, where you can find plenty of resources in addition to going to Jodi's resources at 4000mondays.com. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you're already subscribed. Leave us a review. If you're on YouTube, drop us a like, drop us your comments, give me your feedback. Yes, I do check them all, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourself and be well.